Greetings. My name is Sasha Ernst. I'm the State Fire Coordinator for the Florida State Parks System. Today I'm going to talk to you about how we are trying to increase our prescribed fire capacity and quality in this ever-changing world. So what we're doing to take steps to get more burning done and do better burning on Florida State Parks. I've been with the Florida Park Service for 3 years. Before that, I worked for the National Park Service for 13 years on a prescribed fire module. So prescribed fire has been a large part of my career, and I'm really excited to be doing it in Florida, where we get to practice it on a regular basis over a vast and varying landscape. So the Florida State Park System. When you think of Florida, you probably think of beaches, springs, theme parks, the Mouse, maybe some golf resorts, the Daytona 500, those kind of things, tourism. For us, it's not just that, it's that and what we call the real Florida. Some of that being those tourist destinations, but also the vast landscape that those things are embedded upon. So the real Florida, as we call it, is represented well by the Florida State Parks. We have 175 state parks in the Florida Park Service system, which helps showcase our natural and cultural beauty and history of the state. And 124 of those state parks have natural communities that are fire dependent or fire adapted. So the majority of our parks have a landscape that can burn. And we have over 21 million people who live in the state, and it's the third most populous state in the country. And the economy here is driven by tourism and agriculture and relies heavily on transportation. So everything burns and there's people everywhere, and those can cause some issues. So how do we work around that? Well, first, why are we burning? So the Florida Park Service mission is to preserve, restore, interpret the natural and cultural resources of Florida. And with that, we are mandated by statute to make pristine natural state and keep it there for all time without depleting it. So that gives us the impetus to go ahead and make sure that we're maintaining these natural communities as they were previously, or to return them to a better state. So in Florida, fire season is plural and often a verb. Something always can burn and something almost always does. Fire historian Stephen Pine wrote that basically we are in fire season year-round, and our management recognizes that fire is a key component and one of the main tools in managing the landscape of Florida. So why is that? The fire return interval, it's probably kind of hard for you to see the legend of this slide, but basically the dark red crimson color is a fire return interval of less than 2 years. And the red is 2 to 4 years. So as you can see by the outline of the state there, pretty much everything in the state is in that less than 2 years, or at least less than 4 year fire return interval. There are exceptions with Pecosins or scrub communities that have longer fire return intervals depending on where they are, as well as fragmentation that has, changed some of the patterns over the years. But overall, Florida burns. And that's because lightning was a huge component here. And before there were interstates everywhere, fires would start from lightning strikes and it would burn the landscape. So what is our goal with burning the landscape? Basically, if we have a 3-year fire return interval, we have to keep everything burning every 3 years. We have about 300,000 acres of fire type natural communities throughout the state. And if our last 5 years, we've averaged about 75,000 acres per year. So that tells you if we're trying to burn everything on a 3-year rotation, we're not quite meeting it. However, in 2019, we had our largest burn year ever with a little over 96,000 acres treated. So we're getting a lot closer to that 100,000 acres or just under 100,000 acres that it would take to maintain that 3-year interval. Again, 300,000 acres, currently have about 180,000 in maintenance or fire return is proper. And then that also leaves us with 108,000 in backlog. So if you can see, if we're targeting 88,000 acres this year, we're still 20,000 acres behind, but we're getting better. That brings us to the issue of quality versus quantity. If all we do is focus on trying to get those numbers, we're sacrificing the quality sometimes. And if all we do is focus on small garden patch burning that we get perfect, we're sacrificing the quantity at that time. And so it's got to be a blend somewhere in there. We've got to hit somewhere in the appropriate quality and somewhere in the appropriate quantity. And hopefully we're getting better at this. One of the main ways we do this is basically getting in and doing mechanical treatment to alter the fuels, and then we can go in and treat easier. Working with partners and planning early, especially if we're burning near interstates, DOT, anywhere like that. We have to get involved with the highway patrol. We have to get involved with any of the municipalities that have their air sheds there. There's a lot of planning that we can do earlier. And then working on the landscape, whether that's stacking burns into last year's burn to where we have good buffers, or doing landscape level projects where we can implement on a large scale and we only have to do one treatment in one of those really highly sensitive areas in that 5-year period. Again, treating 5 units in one day allows us 4 other days to burn. And we can also seize the best day for those highly restricted areas. And with that, every time we have a success, we're moving closer towards being successful. Last year, we had a bad year, 45,000 acres. We had flash droughts and we had COVID concerns, but we're still closer for the 45,000 acres we got are not further in backlog. So just building on those successes and keeping moving. So how do we do it right? Basically, prescriptions and objectives. We want to make sure that we are planning properly and know why we're burning. Charismatic species, key species. We try not to manage for a single species, but a lot of times if we can create the natural communities and get that right and get to a reference condition for those communities, we keep the species doing well. Or if we can restore to the natural community that the grasshopper sparrow or the scrub jay needs to be successful, we often find that the composition will come in as well, just returning the process back to that landscape. So we talk about the one objective a lot of times. When we're the ones lighting those fires, a big concern is we don't want to end up on the news. And that is a big one. We have lots of people here, not all of them accept and understand fire. So making sure that we plan really well, again, work with our partners, do outreach, saves us a lot of trouble when people see smoke in the air, especially when the narrative on the news, either in the state or nationwide, could be kind of negative on fire or smoke in the air, especially currently when there's air quality concerns over other issues going on. But what we really want to focus on is the landscape, those natural communities. One of the things I like to talk about is charismatic megaflora. People notice the trees. We all know that the ground cover may have a lot of the diversity in it, but a lot of people who are walking through the parks notice the trees. And it takes 100 years to grow a 100-year-old tree, or 300 years to grow a 300-year-old tree. And we know that implementing fire can be a stressor. So multiple stressors is what ends up killing the vegetation, or these large pine trees, which are often key components of what that landscape looks like to people. So one of the things we've spent a lot of time addressing is residual duff fires is a key component of what kills large pine trees. And that's because it cooks all the feeder roots. Now you add in beetles or a drought after that, and you're gonna lose trees. So one of the key components is thinking about what it is you want to keep out there and trying to manage your fire prescription for those objectives. So that leaves us to prescription. What's it for? Maintenance prescriptions and restoration prescriptions. A lot of times people want to see it happen quickly, but it really takes a gradual approach sometimes. You know, if you have 30-year rough or 50-year rough, just getting the process of fire back in, once you get a mechanical line that you can burn off of, will actually do a lot to start the natural processes, which will, in the long run, help you get to maintenance. So getting those first couple of burns in, even if they're cool or not the season you want, can often open it up for some of those natural processes to begin and really help you in the long run. So not worrying about, you know, getting it all right the first time, but just getting started. And then once you're in maintenance or close to maintenance, it's a lot easier to maintain and keep it because those fuels are under control. So the determinants of fire behavior, that basically is everything in your prescription, but the winds is a big one because of smoke. You know, what's your mixing height, your dispersion index, where's that smoke going to go? That's one of the key factors. And then soil moisture or fuel moistures. How's your system doing? What's the long-term climate looking like around that? And how are your plants going to respond in their vegetative states due to those factors? So the smoke issues for the human concerns, and then drought and soil moisture and fuel moistures for the vegetative changes and concerns. So solutions to this, we have these units. We have to understand the landscape, what's out there. We have to plan. We have to know what we're trying to do, reach out to our partners, develop good prescriptions that are going to help us meet those objectives. Make sure that those are done with verifying the most up-to-date science. And then one that we really need to work on is monitoring. Most of our monitoring currently occurs driving by with a windshield and looking at the unit and saying, yeah, that's looking good, or ooh, that's not looking so good. But our director of the Florida Park Service, Eric Draper, has stated multiple times we are a science-based organization, and so we're currently working on developing increased monitoring protocols and maybe applications for doing that. All right, so thank you. A lot of times we work with the folks from North Florida Prescribed Fire Council or the state's prescribed fire councils so that we can know all of our cooperators and burners, and also, you know, the Joint Fire Science Program and the Southern Fire Exchange is a part of that for getting us the most up-to-date information and helping us reach out if we have questions for solving those issues. Sasha Ernst with the Florida Park Service, thank you, and let's keep those good fires burning.